once again, we are here with our good friend Nick Taimurodo, and he's going to share more about magic. He said he's very excited about this one. I don't know what you have in store for us today, but if you like this series, please make sure that you like and subscribe the channel so you can be notified when each new episode comes out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're on a Scorpio moon, so how could this be any better?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so this one, I'm definitely excited for this one. And considering the nature of this one, this will probably be very interesting for anyone else watching, because this is the part where you can actually start learning something a little bit more practical. Whereas the past episodes, we were learning about the basic mechanics. These are like basic rules, that everyone has to know and consider when doing any kind of magic. And what we're going to learn today is something that may seem a little complicated at first, but trust me, once you get it down, it's very easy. It'll become second nature to you. And honestly, it can really be like a core part, and really you can have a practice even centered even solely just around this, simply because of how versatile and potent this type of practice is. And today, what we're going to be talking about is Sigil Magick. Now, yeah, and it's, like I said, it's a very basic craft. It's a very basic part. Like many different systems utilize these, and because of its simplicity, it's very, very versatile. It's as well as the fact that it can be applied in so many aspects of life. And like I said, you can focus an entire practice on it. I will still obviously encourage to expand onto other things as well, like whether it's candles, whether it's maybe something you want to do with root work, whether it's with water, whatever the case is. Like it's this kind of practice is a great way to get yourself started on doing magic. It's actually how I kind of started. These are the first steps that I took. So of course, at first you're going to be learning all the stuff, reading or listening to videos. But eventually, of course, you are going to get to the point where it's like, all right, let's start putting this stuff into practice. Where should I start? Now, many people would start suggesting to start learning the banishing rituals, which is still not a bad place to start, because the banishing rituals, which we will talk about in another episode, because it does have a very universal function of clearing yourself out, which will definitely be important. But regardless, starting out with sigils, getting a good idea of how things are going to work out for you is still a great way to start dipping your foot into this. So there we go. So anyway, so let's get started. So what is a sigil, right? So to put it simply, what a sigil is a symbolic, or is a statement of intent that's been made into symbolic form. As we talked about in the previous episodes, when it comes to the mind, there's the conscious mind and there's the subconscious mind. The whole point of ritual is to bypass the conscious mind to get in and place instructions into the subconscious mind. Because of course the conscious mind acts as a filter, but it's also the one that's kind of dictating how everything goes. Subconscious mind, is the thing that works in the background, right? Governs our habits, our emotions, as well as our bodily functions, right? We don't have to consciously think about that. To give an example of what a sigil is, here's one right here. So of course the conscious mind is not going to know. Obviously a large majority of people are not going to know what this means, right? Now, of course, when you first create it, the conscious mind is obviously going to know, because you're creating it. But the point of this is for it to get the subconscious to receive it without the conscious mind interfering. At least that's the ideal point. Now we'll get into this as to why this can get into the subconscious, but in any case. So the next one we're going to start getting into is, how do we create this, right? So how do we get a statement of intent into this? Now, of course, sigils are not just restricted to just statements of intent. They can also be words. So say, for example, you want to make one that says life. You can make one that says about life. You can make one that says about love, wealth, whatever it is you want. That's the beauty about sigils. They're so versatile. The limit is just your imagination.
And they're fun to create too. It's like a creative practice.
It very much is. And you'll be surprised as to how many different kind of variations of sigils you can make. Mm-hmm. Like, so far, I can't Some sigils may or may not look similar to each other in some ways, but of course there'll always be these differences where we'll separate them as between one and the other. Like if you ever get words like, oh, what if I don't have any ideas? Trust me, you will. It's really difficult to not make a unique sigil. And of course, they can be very personal to you as well. So, what was the next one? So the first things we got to start thinking about before we create our sigil is, what's our statement of intent? What's the target? What's the theme of the sigil? So first things we're going to need when it comes to creating a sigil, that you're going to need when it comes to creating a sigil, you're going to need a piece of paper and a pencil. And eventually we'll need like a pen, but for now we're going to start with a blank sheet of paper and a pencil.
And no lines, right?
Yeah, no lines. You want completely blank, because when you're drawing your sigil, you don't want to have anything else interfering with it. So if you have a lined piece of paper and you start drawing your sigil, those lines will be incorporated into the sigil, and that can mess it up. So you want to keep it as clear. So here, like blank piece of paper, nothing else interfering. All this purely my design. So for those who are creating your sigil, so like I said, you can either have a blank piece of paper with a pencil, or alternatively, for those initiates that are more technologically inclined, you can absolutely do this completely digitally, which is great. So if you're familiar with things like Photoshop, Inkscape, or whatever drawing program you got, you could absolutely use those and keep it completely digital. You might need to eventually look into getting it printed out. And this will make sense later, because otherwise your eyes might get strained. And by that, I mean, have you tried looking at a computer screen directly for a few minutes? Okay, maybe you have. So have I. But the focus intently, that's not really going to be good for your eyes. But in any case, yes, you can do this completely digitally. So this part as well, like I said, you can do this on paper or digitally, up to you. But for the sake of demonstration, so right now I have this set up on a Google Drive. So if you can also do this on a local Google Doc or local Word document, but nevertheless. So if you're doing it on Google Drive, because for those who are familiar with Google Drive, you will see an image of like the first page. So what you're going to do is, when you create this Google Doc, you're going to want to keep pressing enter until you create a second page. And I will explain more down the line. So now that we're here, this is the part where we create our sigil or the statement of intent of our sigil. And like I said, this could be literally anything. So creating a statement of intent is simple. However, there are a couple things we've got to keep in mind. So wording our sigil, that's incredibly important. I believe we talked about this maybe in the first episode or so, but I'll just bring it up again. When it comes to trying to manifest things, one key thing about in magic is that we must always be careful what we wish for. And sometimes how we word those things is also incredibly important. Because if we don't word it right, because either A, it won't manifest, or B, it might manifest in a way that you may not like it to. Because magic will always manifest in a way that you least expect it, or when you least expect it. Right? Because if you're always expecting it, of course, it's going to be in your conscious mind. As we talked about, for something to manifest, for magic to work, it has to be in your subconscious mind. So meaning you're not thinking about it, you don't even remember it. And when it does happen, it'll become as a complete surprise. Right. But nevertheless, so now when creating our statement of intent, another thing we got to keep in mind as well is what words we can use and what words we need to avoid using. So the subconscious, as we talked about before, doesn't really understand words. That may sound a little bit strange because we're using words in order to communicate. Now, the subconscious, even though this seems it's contradicting what I just said, can understand words, but it doesn't understand definitions. To better explain it, what really understands is the energy behind, like the frequency behind those words, right? So meaning words that have a negative context. So think words like can't, shouldn't, won't, the subconscious does not understand. So let's say, for example, when you create your statement of intent, you want to create a statement that says that you won't lose your next court case. Say you're in a court case, right? It's pretty important that you win it, and you want to use magic to win. Absolutely great. It's absolutely fine. However, if you don't word it correctly, you could end up sabotaging yourself. So when you create your statement of intent, so let's say let's say this. If you say something like, it is my will and intent, and of course you can also just say my will. If you want to add in my intent, that's up to you. That I won't lose my next court case. This right here is a recipe for it to fail, or for it to backfire more like. Because the subconscious will understand every single word, except for this one. So if you want to remove that word, that's what the subconscious hears. So pretty much you'll shoot yourself in the foot, basically, by doing this. So instead, this is another thing to also keep in mind when we talk about the law of polarity. Now, the polarization here we are talking about, that we're focusing on here, is winning versus losing, right? So if you're trying to create a statement of intent and you can't, and you're having trouble thinking of, how do I say I won't lose my court case? Well, what's the opposite? What is it that you really want? You want to win. So you want to say, it is my will and intent that I win my court case. This one will work, because in every single word here, it's priming and telling the subconscious that you will win your court case. So you already set yourself up for victory right there. Now, of course, there are other things to keep in mind, but we'll get into that later. Another thing to keep in mind as well when creating your statement of intent is that you also want to learn how to bind down the actions not wanted. Because, like I said before, magic can manifest in any number of ways, and it will always take the route of least resistance. So say, for example, you want something to happen, right? You want to get something, and it's very benign, right? Like there's nothing wrong with it. Like, oh, hey, I want to have love in my life, right? Like I want to find that, or hang on, what's a good one we could use? Well, the easiest one would be probably be like, say, like money, right? So say like you want to receive money, right? And that's all well and good. But then of course, well, the easiest way for that to happen, if you don't bind down the action not wanted, that money can come from any number of places, which can include, having someone be harmed in the process, or say you really want to get like a fancy car, right? Like maybe you want to get a car that a friend has. Like, oh, I want that same car. Suddenly, say your friend has an accident, or something happens where they lose the car, and then suddenly that car comes to you. Because remember, the sigil is trying to get that car to you. But if you don't specify how you want that car, or if you don't bind down how you don't want it to come, or rather avoid that car coming to you, that's the easiest way, it'll come through that way. So what you're going to want to do, and this should be a pretty good standard for any kind of sigil you want to do, is at the very end of it, you want to put in the condition without harm, or without causing harm. So this will tell your subconscious, like, hey, I want this coming to me, but obviously you want to do it without it. Now, without may seem a little strange because like it seems like a negative context word. However, think of it in the sense of it's the act. You want to tell your subconscious a positive context action, right? So you want it to bring it without doing that. Like this one can be a little bit strange or a little bit weird to try to explain. At least for me, it is right now. But telling your subconscious to do something, to avoid doing something, it will have it listen. So think of it as you're going down a road. You're constantly driving. You're constantly going forward. There's no way to stop. You can speed up. You can slow down, but you cannot stop. You're constantly going down. And down that road, there's a bunch of obstacles. They're big enough that they're to cause concern, but they're small enough that you can avoid them. Now, of course, when you're telling it to your subconscious, like I said, you don't want to tell your subconscious, don't crash into that obstacle. Tell it to avoid it. So because it's telling it to take an action to go around it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, this is another thing when it comes to magic. For all the beautiful things it can do pretty harmful things too. So bear in mind and how you use your power. Also, another thing to keep in mind when it comes to creating your statement of intent is that you also want to keep it simple. You want to be specific though, right? Like you don't want to just throw in a general blah direction of what you want. You do want to try to specify what it is you want to bring. But of course, there's a bit of a paradox here because there's also a point where you don't want to be too specific, right? Believe I used the example in the first episode. What magic can be akin to like a water hose, right? Like it needs that direction, right? The water is the magic, but it needs to go somewhere. Like imagine like turning on a water faucet but doesn't have a hose, just kind of stays there, just kind of goes everywhere, right? That hose is to direct that energy. But of course, that the water needs a bit of water pressure, right, to push it through. Like, if you have enough water pressure, it'll funnel through and shoot where you want it. However, if you don't have enough, it'll kind of go bleh. Or if it's too much pressure, you might end up, stopping it altogether. So generally you want to have at least, you can have like 2 or 3 conditions as to what you want your subconscious to do, but you don't want to have too much. Subconscious loves simplicity. If it's too complex, it'll fail. The conscious mind loves complexity. Subconscious, not so much. Because as this saying goes, simplicity is divinity. Subconscious is the link to divinity. So you want to keep it as simple as possible. All right, so for this example sigil, this could be anything. I don't know if you guys have any ideas, something, I don't know, wacky or mundane, like even just bringing in like a colored ball into your front yard. It could be, we see like a rainbow colored truck, or maybe literally anything.
I intend to see a bird fly outside my window.
Mm.
No, not that wacky, but
Yeah, it's something. Is there a specific bird? Like
yeah. My first thought was eagle,
uh-huh.
but then my
Okay.
second thought was blue jay.
A blue jay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it is my will and intent that a blue jay, that I see, because again, wording here as well, because yeah, your sigil can be like a blue jay will fly past your window, but if you might not notice it, right? You will never know if it worked or not.
Right.
So it's my will and intent that I will see a blue jay fly by my window. Now, of course, like I said before, without causing harm, because you never know, that blue jay could come in spiraling right into something and smack right into your window and unfortunately break a wing. Yeah, so, or fly into someone and cause a car crash.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what the area.
So, without can be used because we're saying causing harm, but without is not equal to won't.
Yeah, without causing harm. Yeah, so without, so basically it's trying to exclude. It's a little bit weird. Like I said, unfortunately, right now, I'm off the top of my head, I'm not sure how to explain it, which is a little bit embarrassing. But
I'm sure it's
yeah. But however, best way to think. Well, right now, because I think I remember explaining it and thinking to myself like, aha, that's how it works. Because think of it as like everything happening like within like a contained area, and everything is, you want to have it without, like you want to be outside, have outside that area, that action. So without, it's outside of that.
I kind of thought of that earlier too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I take back what I said earlier, because I remember thinking the same thing way ago, and I just kind of forgot. Only now I just remembered it, because it's not something I really think about all the time.
It's just, you know it, and you know that that's the way to do it, and then you just do it that way.
Yeah.
You just don't want
Yeah,
to left a little confused.
Yeah.
Wait, though, it's without it. It's out of the realm.
So yeah. So now we have here our statement of intent. Like I said before, you want to keep the parameters as simple as possible. So from 1 to 2 to 3 parameters. Keep it like that. Again, you do want to be specific, but not too specific. This one's good because you'll see a blue jay fly outside your window, right? But that blue jay can be anywhere. You'll either see it in the trees in the distant, maybe it can be on your windowsill, maybe on your patio if you have one, wherever you will see it, because that's the whole point, right? So now the next part we got to do.
I think I might have just seen it. See something fly. I don't know if it's a blue jay.
Well, could have been something. It's funny because sometimes sigils can even. I heard stories of people like of making sigils or thinking of making statement of intent and immediately manifested, or they just saw it for a brief moment and immediately happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next step you want when.
Sorry, the sigil is kind of like a tool, like it's an extra step.
It's a guide.
Yeah. Like a sigil, yeah, definitely. A sigil is I usually attribute to like a lens, right? Where like you're focusing that power. So just imagine like the power you're focusing is pure white light. The lens is like a colored lens. So say like I really want purple light coming in, so you want to put in blue, you're red, you got purple light. All right, cool. There's purple light. Now everything looks like it's grape juice. Okay, cool. So next up, we're going to want to do is we want to take the statement of intent. We want to simplify it, right? Because remember, the subconscious loves simplicity, and this will be incredibly useful because we want to try to reduce the amount of letters there are. Mm-hmm. So next, what we're going to do, we want to take this sentence and we want to remove all the vowels from it. Now, if you're doing digitally, like I am here, this can be easy. Just go to a vowel remover, and especially if you're lazy, you could just put it into a vowel remover right here and have it remove all the vowels. And here we have our produced sentence. Next, so there we go. But we still need to simplify it further. So next, what we're going to do, we want to remove every single repeating letter in the sentence. So now this part can be a little bit like, oh man, I really got to think and focus. But the more you practice this, you'll get faster with it. And eventually,
It's a fun brain exercise.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Eventually, once you get this process down, it'll become second nature to the point where just like, hey, I want to make a sigil. You immediately sit down, you break all your tools, and you'll be done within like 10 or 15 minutes. It's really that easy. And it's like I said earlier, it's very powerful. Sigil creation is in itself an amazing thing to practice, and a good starting step. So first letter there, we got T, we got S, we got M, we got Y, we got W, got L, got N, got D. And now we're starting to get back to repeating letters. So next one is N. We already got N. We already got T. We already got N. We got E.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Next one we got H. We already got W. We already got L. We already got S. We don't have B. Next we got B. Got L. We don't have J. We already got Y. We don't have F. We add that in. We already got L. We got Y, B, Y, M, Y. We have W. We got W, N, D. We got N, D, W, D. We don't have C. We have S. Yeah, we have S. G. H, R. Got H.
Yeah, we need H.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have H.
Yeah, we have H.
Oh yeah. We need R though.
Yeah. R. And then we already have N. So then we have our simplified statement of intent. Now, some people as well, may forego doing the whole removal of vowels. For those who may have looked into syncretism, know that vowels are like have that power, right? They contain that initial source of power, right? And that might be absolutely true. You might be thinking, well, wouldn't I want to keep the vowels in the sigil to have that power? You could if you want. So the vowel removal is not necessary. However, it will make your job, the next step, a little bit more difficult. Because you got to remember, like we said earlier before, a sigil is like a lens. Because technically, when it comes to this whole process, you're the source of that power. Now, sure, you can have an extra source here if you so choose, but it's not necessary, right? And you can experiment to see if, maybe it works better for you or not. But like I said, it will make the next step a little bit more difficult. This is why we want to simplify it as much as possible, because even without the vowels, sigils still work.
Okay.
So that will be completely down to you. Also, another key thing as well. So obviously, if you're understanding this, and hopefully you can read, you'll know that we're using the English alphabet here, right? Now, sigil creation, you might be thinking like, so this might be exclusive only with just the English alphabet? Absolutely not, because you can actually do the same process with any kind of alphabet. So if you're using an alphabet that obviously doesn't use, English lettering, you can absolutely do the same process with those letters too. So say Jap.
Oh, it's just that our subconscious is used to seeing English, so we want to use that.
In many ways, yes. If you want to try to experiment with different ones, they will still work, because also got to remember our subconscious as well is still connected to that universal subconscious, and that universal subconscious has every single language, every single lettering. So even if our conscious mind does not understand, the subconscious still will. So if someone makes a sigil in a different language they may not speak, let's just say Japanese, for example, right? And they show it to you. Yeah, consciously you may not understand it, even if you don't speak a lick of Japanese or you never mind reading it. Yeah, your conscious mind will not understand it, but your subconscious will. So also another thing for those who might be of interest as well, there's even other things you can also use as well that may not necessarily be part of a language. So this is also based off of another author's book of an author called Donald Tyson. He wrote a book called Familiar Spirits, and on it he had a list of glyphs that are associated with different letters, right? So A is associated with a triangle. So let's say, for example, when we start drawing our sigil, and this will make sense in a moment, you can use these symbols as well. So A is like the upwards triangle, which is, also attributed with fire. So if you want to do something with fire related, you have the letter A in your statement, you can use the triangle to really emphasize that fire. You can got B with the infinity knots, C with the U, etc., etc. Obviously, you can see all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. As well, so here's a list as well on the subtler meanings as well with those letters. So letter A is related to the masculine element of fire, is symbolic with potency. B is neutral, so for those, just so they're not confused when they see the letter N, spirit, infinity, knot. C, cut, feminine, fire, reception, cauldron, etc. Now, anyone watching this can pause and take a look real quick as well. Also, another cool thing for those who might be interested, especially when it comes to low folk magic or witchcraft, here's also the witch's alphabet, or I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, the band alphabet as well. These can also be used as well, and I'll show you in a moment how these things play into effect. So of course, so when your statement of intent, you'll swap out the letters for the ones you see here. So for all the letter A's, you swap it up with this first one, B, this one, etc. Same thing applies to the ones here.
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing we also want to consider as well. Actually, you know what? I think we'll get into that later. So next part, we get to the fun part. So this is the part where you get your piece of paper. Now, again, you can also, hang on, I should probably switch this off so you guys can see better. Okay. So this is the part where you start getting your piece of paper, or if you're doing digitally, you open up your document. All right, so this is the part where you want to get a lead pencil, right? So when drawing your sigil, you don't have to worry about too much about making a mistake in the first run, because sorry, I have a brain fart there. So when creating your sigil, don't worry too much about making a mistake, because if for some reason you make a sigil and you're not satisfied with it, doesn't seem right to you, you can erase it and start again, and it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. So you have your piece of paper here. So the first thing you start writing down at the top, so start writing the letters you have. So we got T, got S, got M, Y. And we got W. It'd be better if I just write it down here. This is not so easy.
Right.
L, N, we got D, H. Oh shit, I'm actually going a little bit over here. B, J, F, C, G, and R. All right. All right, so now, you guys see this front facing or is it backwards?
You can see it good. Yep, front facing.
Okay, good, because on my screen it's backwards.
Okay, yep.
All right, so now what we're gonna do next is we're gonna take all these letters and we're gonna mix them together. We're gonna make them into one big giant symbol. So basically, we're gonna take all, don't fall over, don't stay there, okay. Take all this and turn it into something that resembles this, right? So when creating your sigil, you also wanna try to simplify it as much as possible. So obviously having all these together, that might make a pretty complex sigil, and we want to avoid doing that at all possible. So when drawing it, every single letter that you see here can absolutely be mixed in to each other. So say, for example, we got B over here. B also has the letter C in it. Also has the letter D. We also got the, what else we got? Got the letter N. It's also in the letter W. Well, W also contains the letter M. Even S has N in it too. And how it mixes in doesn't have to be like 100% perfect. Like I know my writing here is a little bit fucky, but it does not have to be 100% on the dot. You can definitely mix it around a little bit. Right, maybe you want to make the S a little stretched out like this. S is still there. I really should have had an eraser ready, but you can only prepare so much. That's all I have to do. Hopefully this works. Oh, good, it works. So you can start with anywhere, doesn't matter which letter, as long as you get all of it done. And like I said before, you can also, the symbols that you saw earlier, you can use. It's a substitute for the T. So T would technically be this, right? This would be the letter T. Doesn't have to be, but it can be. But we can start with, let's see. We got the letter H, didn't we? Oh, we did.
It's over there.
Oh yeah, we got H. Yeah, we got H. So letter H here, we can start with the H. So we can start, say, like this. That already crosses off H, and that crosses off T. So what else? This also crosses off the letter L. What else does this cross off? Yeah, there you go. We just knocked out 3 letters just by the letter H alone. So that's our first step. So what else can we do? We can also add in here. Add in that little tick. Now we got the letter F. What else can we add in? Oh, that reminds me actually. Now, another thing you could also do as well, depending what kind of sigil you want to make, for those of you who are, and hopefully by now you should be, but obviously if you're still learning, that's fine. For those of you who are familiar with the astrological symbols, so say Jupiter, for instance. We got Jupiter here, right? Here we already have the letter T, and we also can get the letter S as well. And technically we also have the letter N too. The letters can also be backwards. They don't have to be front facing. So say, for example, the letter G, still have it there. And in many ways, that actually works better. Because you want to put it in a way where the conscious mind may not recognize it. Now, obviously, if you're an astrologer or familiar with the astrological symbols, yeah, you're going to recognize Jupiter. You're obviously going to recognize it. But the point is that you want to try to forget the statement of intent that is bound to it in the future. There. So what else we got here? We also got the letter R. Also, the letter R also has the letter P in it too. So that crosses out R.
We don't know.
What's another thing we can do? Oh, that also crosses out C. And I'm pretty sure we have J crossed out, right? Yeah, we do. Yeah, J is also crossed out. And actually,
Oh, yeah, CJ.
what else we got? Sure we had Y in here too. So we got rid of Y.
Why?
What else can we mix?
If you connected that R, the top part of the leg, that would be B. Can you do that, or would that mess up the R?
No, actually, that's a good point. Because B is still in R.
Right. Okay.
Or R is still in B, I mean.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now we got to take out the letter B. And that also gives us the letter W and the letter M.
Wow. So W and M are in B.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also gives us the letter D. I'm surprised I didn't notice that earlier.
Right.
Wait.
Is there an S?
If we curve the H a little bit here,
Yeah.
we got the letter G too.
Okay.
And what else? So yeah, this is a little messy, but that's fine.
Okay.
What else we
We
got?
just need S. Is S in there?
Yes. It is now.
Okay.
So yeah, now we got all the letters. So that's really the process as to creating a sigil.
And then always circle it.
Yep, circle it.
And then if it's on paper, you want to cut it in a circle like you did on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So from here, now that you've drawn your first sigil, now this is the part where you have to figure out, does it feel right to you? Now, of course, for some reason, it doesn't feel right to you. Or if you think yourself, I can make this simpler, you can absolutely just erase it and start again. But for the time being, this one seems to work pretty well. So at this point, what you're going to want to do, now you can have the same piece of paper, just have the whole process as well written down. And you get a second sheet of paper and just redraw it just to get a bit of a practice. So let's try this again. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then here you also try to figure out if you can't find a way to simplify it. And of course, things can get better. If you can't figure it out right off the bat, that's absolutely fine. But this will be the general process as to creating the sigil. So keep trying until you get it right. Once you get it right, then congratulations. So you'll take that same sigil and you will place it on another piece of paper. You'll draw it. This will be, the anchor that you will be creating. So when you do this, when you draw it, this is the part where you want to use pen. Right now, depending on what it is you're trying to do, you also want to consider using, specific colored pen. So black, blue, red as well. So say if you want to do something with wealth or Jupiter, you might want to consider using the color blue. If you want to do something with vanishing, so Saturn, you want to use the color black. Maybe if you want to do something with Mars, maybe red. Just use whatever color correspondence. And also, of course, you can mix in as well the correspondences such as the astrological symbol into the sigil itself and mix and match. So it's you want to do something might be universal. That's an idea I've had earlier where, maybe you want to do something that is both banishing and drawing in. As we talked about earlier, the phase of the moon can also determine, we'll talk about that in a bit, will determine whether or not you want to pull something in or banish something away. So going back to creating the statement of intent, and you have to consider what it is you're doing. Are you pulling or are you pushing? And so say if you want to push something away and banish something, you'll definitely consider using Saturn in it. So that already, you got the letter S, you already got the letter T, got the letter L. You can also mix in as well. So say, I don't know, you got Jupiter too. So that's just inspiration. If you guys want to, if anyone watching this wants to do something with that. Yeah, most likely, whatever sigil you create is going to be incredibly unique. So far, I have not seen any look-alike sigil. And by look-alike, I mean, I've seen sigils that look similar to each other. but not to the point where they're like identical twins. So
Say you want to do something banishing, you want to get rid of something, you could do it on Saturday at the Saturn hour during a waning moon and use Saturn in the symbol and black.
yeah, that would be a definitely a very well attuned sigil to banishing. And actually, that's actually a good thing to also consider as well. So when creating your sigil, and really this can apply to any kind of magic you're doing, so it's not strictly sigil creation, is you also want to keep an eye on the astrological transits too. This is also why it's important to be an astrologer. Learn to be a mystic first, because this is going to play well into it. So hang on, let me pull the screen up again. All right, so we have our sigil here. We have everything done. So next thing we also want to consider, and this will be done usually prior to getting started here. So you want to take a look at, of course, the moon, right? So today, I don't know if we said if we're recording or not, but we mentioned how the moon was in Scorpio. So doing this is not 100% necessary, but there's one thing you need to learn as an astrologer, in accordance with the law of rhythm, is you want to be in rhythm with the universe. You want to be in harmony with it, right? Because if you're not, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to be swimming against the current. Does that make magic impossible to do? Not necessarily. It'll just be more difficult. So if you really need something to work, you want to keep this thing in mind, right? This is another phrase I remember learning is whenever you do magic, you want to stack it. You want to stack as many correspondences as to what it is you want as possible. So if you want wealth, you really want to, or want expansion, you want to put in Jupiter, the symbol of Jupiter. Perhaps you want to wait until the moon is in a place where it'll rule whatever it is you're trying to expand. So say money, for example. You want to wait until the moon is in Taurus or maybe in Capricorn, right? If it's relationships, perhaps you want to wait, well, Taurus as well, because Venus, or Libra. No, probably Libra. Right, and et cetera, et cetera. Another thing to also keep in mind is knowing if the moon is waning or waxing. Because we talked about before, when the moon is waning, that's the best time to doing black magic. So pushing things away, cutting things out of your life, right? So for those people might be thinking, okay, that makes sense. But what if I want to bring in money, but it's a waning moon? And of course, waiting for like a waxing Taurus moon, that's like half a year, right? If you miss it, it's like, oh shit, I have to wait a whole year. Well, fortunately, you don't necessarily have to do that, because now you got to think about what's back to the law of polarity. So if you want wealth, what's the opposite of wealth? Because remember, this universe is electromagnetic. It works off pressure mediation. So when you increase in something, you decrease the opposite. So if I got too little of something, what's the opposite? In this case, it'd be poverty. So you want to push away poverty, banish poverty, because when you banish poverty, wealth is going to increase. So there you go. You can still bring in wealth, and you're doing that with black magic, in a sense, because now you're pushing the opposite away. So if you want to, yeah. I will say when it comes to using Saturn and wealth, now of course you can experiment. Don't be avoid being fearful. I caught myself there. For those who are paying attention, you'll know why. What the heck? It was there. It was right there. There's. So of course, because Saturn, because of its in nature as well, it can be very heavy. It can very slow things down. So may want to be somewhat considerate as to how you use it, because how you use a certain power can affect how the spell goes. So you do need to be a bit of a scientist here, right? Or for those of you who are really into cooking, for example, maybe there's something a little closer to home, is knowing when to add in a spice. Do you want to add it in first and either dry fry a spice, or maybe do you want to put it in after the water's boiling or whatever? Anyways, you got to think of it like that, assuming that makes sense in some capacity. Another thing to also consider as well when it comes to the moon is considering its whether or not it's void of course. Now, what does void of course mean? Void of course means when the moon has no more aspects left to obtain before it enters the next sign, right? Now, that can be a little bit tricky to discern. The best way that I would suggest is to just look up a calendar. There are many websites out there. Just search up astrological void of course, moon calendar, or something to that effect. You'll find plenty out there. It'll tell you like what day it starts and what time it starts. So you want to avoid doing magic outside of, or avoid doing magic in that time. So make sure the moon is not void of course. Making sure I get my message there clear. Another thing to consider as well, again, this part is not 100% necessary, but this can add to it, right? Is to consider the day. Now, each day of the week has attributed with a different planet, right? At least the 7 classical planets. So Sunday, that should be obvious. Monday is Moon Day. Tuesday will be Mars Day. Wednesday, Mercury Day. Thursday, Thor's Day. Zeus Day. Jupiter Day. Friday, Freya's Day, Venus. Then Saturday, Saturn Day, Saturn's Day. So depending on which day it is will determine which power you're using, which one you really want to call upon, or at the very least, which one's easier to call upon. All right. So if you want to do things with wealth, you want to either look at Thursday or Venus. If you want to do with things with banishing, you want to clear something out, like Nick said, Saturday, Saturn's Day, right? Or even binding, like something the other way can also work too, because Saturn's can be either about constriction, so it's either making constrictions or breaking restrictions, right? Or putting restrictions on other things too. Of course, you want something to do with the home, right? Or motherhood, like fertility. You want the moon. You want vitality, life, charisma. Of course, you got the sun, Sunday. Or if maybe you want to be experimental, maybe you don't know what power to use because what you're doing is just kind of niche. Then you can go with Mercury Day. Mercury's Day is like the best day to just experiment, just to see like, yeah, let's see if this works. And that's something I actually highly encourage when it comes to going through a magical practice. Because while we have things that you can easily figure out, things that we know we want to do, right? And of course, you're probably going to end up doing them anyway. However, and of course, to expand our knowledge, especially when it comes to magic, we can read books, we can listen to videos, read articles, whatever, and gain knowledge that way. That's absolutely still valid. But one of the best places to gain knowledge when it comes to doing magic is doing it yourself. Because that's where you get the true knowledge on magic. This is why I highly encourage, don't dabble in it. Don't just dip in your toe, dip out, or only go in when you need to. Get into a regular practice. So get into the habit of having an everyday practice. Get into the habit of like thinking to yourself, like, oh, hey, like if I want to resolve something, let's try doing with magic. Or perhaps even just every morning, it's like, hey, I want to improve something in my life, right? Let's give an offering to a planet. So say on Thursday, give an offering to Jupiter. On Friday, give an offering to Venus. Do your banishing rituals as well, which we'll cover on another episode.
And then on the day too, you can use this app you showed us, which is Planetary Times, and it tells you what hour you're on. So if you wanted to banish something, you do it on Saturday and at the Saturn hour.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's another thing to consider. Like, so when you start creating your sigil, and this applies to rituals too, whatever hour you start doing it, that's the energy that you're going to be working with. So think of it as the day is the power you're using, the hour is how you're using it. So say, for example, if you have a Saturday and then you're using the power of Venus. Now, there are many applications. This is not exhaustive, right? This is why it's important to know these archetypes. So if you mix Saturn and Venus together, you get marriage, right? If you mix, say, Jupiter and say
Mars.
The Mars, yeah. You can expand, say, your energy, right? And I think it also works the other way around too.
Exorcism too would be Mars and Jupiter.
Yeah, and also and the Sun and Saturn as well would also be with exorcisms too. Yeah, so on a Sunday, hour of Saturn, that's the time to also do exorcisms. Of course, you can also have the hours in their purity. So like I said earlier, Mercury Day on the hour of Mercury, if you really don't know what to do, or if you're experimenting, then Wednesday, hour of Mercury, whichever one, perfect time to just go wild. Now, of course, use common sense. Magic can do all sorts of things. So if you got a bunch of gremlins that kicks in your door and kicks you in the shin, that's on you.
That
What
won't
else?
happen.
It won't happen, eh?
We'll
I get some shin
avoid-
pads if I were you.
We'll avoid that.
So, what was next?
Well,
Yeah, so
we drew the sigil, and then now what do we do? That we drew it.
yeah. So now that you've drawn it and you put it on a piece of paper and you cut it out. So when cutting out as well, you want to keep it like, relatively smallish. Now the size of it doesn't really matter, just kind of oh shit. But before we get any further as well, as we just talked about, the day and the hour, as well as whether the moon is waning or not, you also want to keep this in mind as well. So when we made this was done during the hour of Mars, I think. At least my time it was the hour of Mars. Mars. So this was done on a Friday. Friday, hour of Mars, on a waning moon. And of course, Scorpio. So this is going to be good for, future you, because, and I'll explain why, because of course when you're experimenting yourself with magic, you'll get some things that could work, and you might get some things that won't work, right? And maybe they won't work for a variety of reasons, right? Could be because you didn't follow a certain law that you were supposed to follow and you broke it, or perhaps maybe the correspondences didn't line up and just whatever it is you're trying to do just didn't work, which, can happen, which is why, why we experiment, why we see what works and what doesn't work. So this will be for far future you reference, and it's good for cataloging as well. But yeah, so now that we got that, so what do we do next? So now that we have the sigil all drawn, ready to go, there are two things we can do. Well, actually, multiple things we can do. Now, one way that I've learned was something called pre-charging, right? Pre-charging is basically deeply embedding the statement of intent into the sigil, which I know seems a little bit strange because, like, technically it already is, but really is more so having a heavier imprint. Now, this is optional because this is something that I've learned from one guy, but most people that would teach how to create sigils don't really include this. So you don't have to do this, but this helps. So, oh, hang on. So what you want to do next after you finish drawing your sigil, you're going to take your sigil, this piece of paper, and you're going to put yourself in your ritual space. So your ritual space would, obviously normally be like your temple. Could be, if you have an altar, which is encouraged to have, you'll have your altar, wherever it is you're going to do most of your spell work. So of course, for those who are beginning, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find a good place to be in. Draw your magic circle around. So your magic circle can comprise either a pure visualization, so you can imagine it. So you can draw and trace it with your hand. So pretty much like this. And you can either draw it by shooting a laser out of your hand around you with a corresponding color. So it'll be like white or even light blue, violet. It could pulsate colors. Of course, what color it is will depend on what it is you're doing. So this is the part about magic where, yes, there's a lot of rules, but also there's a lot of freedom. It's very paradoxical.
And you want to use your right hand to do this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so you want to use your right hand because your right hand channel is the one that gives, while your left hand is the one that receives. So now that we have our sigil drawn and good to go, now because of a little hiccup there, I had two sigils drawn here. I'm assuming this is the sigil I had drawn before. So now that we got our sigil drawn, we simplified it as much as we can, right? So we ended up with this result. And of course, remember, when you're drawing a sigils, it's not always the first attempt that you always get. Sometimes you could make one, not realize that it's like, oh, I'm not really satisfied with this one. You can always erase it and start again. But once you get a sigil, so let's say this is the sigil that we are satisfied with. Oh, well and good. So what we're going to do next is that we're going to take another piece of paper, and so that's where we're going to draw. So take a piece of paper. That's where you'll draw your final sigil, or wherever you're going to keep it, or you can also, depending on how your setup is, you can just erase everything else and keep the sigil. Whatever the case is, that'll be up to you. So you have your sigil, you draw your circle, and then you'll cut it out, or you'll print it out if you're doing it digitally. The next step we're gonna start covering over is, of course, what to do with it now that we have it. So if we so want, we can choose to activate it now, albeit that may not necessarily be the best thing we want to do. Alternative we can also do is something called what's called pre-charging. Now, pre-charging a sigil is going to be very similar to activating a sigil. What does pre-charging mean? Well, pre-charging is to essentially link the statement of intent directly, or at least to reinforce that statement of intent directly into the sigil. For some people might be thinking, well, shouldn't the statement of intent already be, already inherently linked to it, since we literally built the sigil from it? Well, yes, that is true, because this step is essentially optional, but all it really does is kind of makes it stronger, right? And when it comes to doing magic, you always want to try to increase, or what can also be known as, stacking your magic. So like when you do a spell, you do a ritual, you want to try to put in as many correspondences as you reasonably can. So it's not just like you only incorporate one aspect and that's it. You want to try to put in as many things as possible. So you're doing a candle ritual, for example. You don't just have the color correspondence. Maybe you also want to incorporate an oil. So say if you want to do a wealth spell, you want to add in, some money oil. And, these oils you can buy online. There are many occult stores that you can order from. Or if maybe even a physical store if you know one. But you can order them. Prices can range from like $10-20 depending on, who's selling them. But that's also an option that you can look for them. Or if you know how to do it, you can also make them yourself. But nevertheless, when you, like I was saying, you want to stack your magic as much as possible. So pre-charging a sigil is very simple and straightforward. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your sigil, right? You're going to, after it's cut out, and you're going to go to your ritual space or to your altar. So if you have an altar, you're going to place it on your altar. If you don't have one because you've yet to make one, or simply just don't have room to make one, then simply wherever it is that is most suitable to do any kind of magic that you're currently doing. So if you have a big empty place in your room, if you're in a studio apartment, that works fine too. So what you're going to do first is that you're going to go to your ritual space. You're going to visualize yourself in a magic circle, right? Or if you have the means to do so, you can also draw an actual circle on the ground, or trace it if you're outside into the dirt. Or if you have like a rug or like a mattress that has a circle in it, whether it's one that you specifically got for that or one that you've adapted to, that works fine too. But if you don't have those things, you can draw one with using your mind's eye. Next, you're going to step into a circle and you're going to sit in it, whether you want to kneel, cross your legs, or stand in it. It's completely up to you. You're going to take that same sigil you have and you're going to gaze into it, right? So while you're gazing into it, you're going to be putting in all your senses into it. This same technique is going to apply to any kind of visualization you're going to do. So while you're gazing into it, you're going to start imagining your intention coming true, or not just coming true, but already happening. So say you want to have a sigil for more friends, right? While you're gazing into your sigil, you're going to keep your statement of intent in mind, but you're also going to imagine and visualize, you having more friends, right? You're going to be visualizing you conversing with your friends, having a good time with your friends, right? You're going to bring all your senses into it. So you're going to bring your visual, your auditory senses into it, even tactile, like the physical feeling of it, the emotion, everything. You want to put yourself into that trance that it's already there. It's already happened. It's happening for you right now. The same principle applies to anything. So if you're going with money, same thing. You're going to feel that you have the money with you. You're going to see that you have the money with you. You're going to feel happy. That's like, oh, I'm so grateful. It's happened. I have the money that I was looking for, right? Or even love, whether it's literally just whatever it is. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, but basically you want to feel it that you already have it. So you're going to be doing all of that while you're gazing into it, right? And you're just going to be putting the complete focus into it. And you're going to gaze through the sigil as if it's like a window. So while you're looking into it, just imagine everything happening through it as if you're watching it on a TV screen, right? And of course, even transplanting yourself into that situation too. So it can be, you're basically putting yourself into a trance, and the same trance, it's going to apply to almost anything you do, right? This is one of the reasons why in the first episode, we talked about some of the important skills that you're going to need as a magician is learning how to visualize and how to concentrate, and also learning how to meditate, right? And of course, this leads back to what I was saying, learning how to be a mystic first, learning how to work within. Meditation is one of those things. Because in order to start changing things outside of yourself, you need to learn how to change things within yourself, even tapping into that deepest part of yourself. And so while you're gazing into the sigil, you're going to maintain that for maybe roughly 10 to 20 minutes. Now, the time itself can always vary from person to person, right? There's no exact thing. These are just the recommended time frames because it's going to be different for everybody. While you're gazing into it, sometimes you may notice some visual distortions or even visual effects may happen. Again, this will vary from person. So you could see like sparkles, you could see things kind of shifting around. Maybe you can see the sigil kind of just change shape. If that's happening, that's absolutely fine. That means, it's charging. You're putting your energy into it. Sometimes you may even see flash certain colors, right? Whatever the case, you're going to keep doing that. You're going to keep maintaining it. Eventually, you will get to the point, and this is going to be different for everyone else too, right? This is something you need to figure out in your own practice when this happens. So you may feel like a certain surge of emotion because that's when you know it's been charged, right? So you may feel like a surge in emotions. Maybe you'll see like a certain visual effect. Maybe it'll start sparkling far more vividly, right? Maybe it will glow a certain color. Maybe you'll feel like a surge. Maybe you'll see it surge with something. These are just examples, right? This will be down, like I said, this will be down to you to figure out when this mean that it's charged. Now that will be pre-charged. And so once you've pre-charged it, then afterwards, unless you're going to use it for something right off the bat, what you're going to do next, and this is going to be probably the most difficult part, and really this can apply to any kind of ritual or spell, is that you need to put it away and forget about it and keep your mind off it. Like I always said before, and we covered it before when it comes to the mind, is that in order for magic to work, it has to be taken off your conscious mind, right? Because if it's on your conscious mind, because if you can remember what it does, then what that means, it's not in your subconscious mind. And as we talked about before, in order for magic to work, it needs to be in your subconscious mind. So if you're thinking about it and you're expecting it, it's not going to show up, right? Because the divine loves to surprise you, right? Like we said before, or at least I'm pretty sure we said before, when, like, say if you're writing a book or writing a screenplay, right? Like you want people to be surprised, right? You don't want to spoil people. And the same thing as when people go to see a movie or read a book, right? I'm like specifically like say a storybook for entertainment. You don't want to be spoiled. You want things to be a surprise. Like you don't want to know how it ends. Magic the divine kind of like works much in the same way. It always comes when you least expect it. So how can you not expect it if you're always thinking about it? So after now that you have it pre-charged, then at that point it's a waiting game. You pretty much wait until you completely forget about it. Now this is the part where you have to practice. This is where you have to really train your mind to keep off of it. Now, of course, people may have some difficulties. Some people may find it very easy. This will vary from person to person, but this is why we practice. That's why it's highly encouraged to have a practice. Train yourself, right? Same thing as like trying to be fit. Right? You don't just do 10 push-ups once and you're done. You got to keep it up. Same thing being healthy. You don't eat a salad once or fast once. You got to keep it up. You got to do it regularly. And magic's no different. So that's pre-charging it. Now, of course, the next step, of course, is to actually use it. Maybe you want to actually activate it. How do you do that? Now, to activate a sigil, to actually put it into effect, is going to be very, very similar to pre-charging it, right? It's going to, if not almost the exact same process. The only difference between the two is that instead of visualizing the statement of intent coming true, right? Because of course, if you're charging it, it's assumed that you don't remember what it is. You completely forgot about it. So how can you do that? So if you've forgotten about it. So like I said, it's going to be very similar, but instead of you just visualizing that, you're just focusing on the sigil itself, right? You're pretty much going to have the notion in your mind that this is activating, or it has already activated. You're pouring your energy into it. You're basically turning on the on switch, right? But of course, you need to give it the energy to do so. You need to tell your subconscious that this thing needs to activate. This thing needs to turn on. Needs to happen. So much in the same process. You're going to gaze into it. You're going to keep putting energy into it, right? You may start seeing the same visual effects where it starts to sparkle, starts to move, pulsate. Whatever it is you see, you can start seeing those effects. And much in the same sense, you're going to keep doing that until you feel that surge, that sign that you activated it. And once you activated it, then you're done. At that point, what you will do is that you end up disposing the sigil, depending on what kind of element it is. So if it's you made, because once you activated it, the sigil is not considered burned, because of course it's reason why it would be burned, because it's related to the element of fire, which is action, right? This is energy, it's a movement. All right. So now when it comes to disposing of a sigil, you can just burn it, right? Or you can also use it in correspondence to whatever element that has been made under. So if it's made under a fire sign, so the moon was under a fire sign, Aries, Sagittarius, or Leo, that's not the correct order, but you get it. Then of course, you would burn it, right? And then you scatter the ashes. If it's, say an air sign, then you can still burn it and scatter the ashes into the air outside, or you can just rip it up and throw it out there. If it's water, you may throw it into a stream. If it's earth, then you may bury it. Now, you don't have to do that. Burning it will be just fine. But that's what you do after disposing it. Now, another thing to also consider is that when you're pre-charging your sigil, because the action itself, the pre-charging and charging is so very similar, it is entirely possible that when you're pre-charging a sigil, that it could activate right then and there. Now, for those who may think, what if that happens? That's absolutely fine, because what that means is that you saved yourself time. And of course, because it'll be a surprise, because oftentimes you may not know if you activate it or not. You may do the pre-charging sequence, and then afterwards it's you're done. You put it away, and you forget about it. But then, of course, you wouldn't be expecting it to be activated, so it may even still show up. Now, of course, don't go expecting that, I probably activated it, because, well, that's counterintuitive, because then you may end up screwing yourself there, and subsequently your own sigil. So, like with anything, and it's paradoxical too, because you're going in with the expectation that it's already happened, but at the same time you're also not expecting it. So I know some people, that may seem paradoxical to some people, but magic is paradoxical, right? It's not logical. Even though there is a logic, this is not a earthly mundane logic. And some people can be a little bit able to wrap their minds around that, but you got to keep at it. Eventually you'll get it. So what was next after this? So now that you've become pre-charging, charging, now next was other uses for sigils. So that's just when it comes to charging and activating, that's just mainly for using a sigil by itself, right? You can still use the sigil afterwards, right? Because if you activate a sigil and it works, it doesn't mean that you can never use it again. You absolutely still can. And in many ways, that's actually a good thing, because if it works, another thing you can also do is something called shoaling. So shoaling a sigil, meaning that if you make another sigil, so say you make like a money sigil, right? It works, it brought you wealth, great. And you want to make another one. You can absolutely bring it, if you want to use these sigils in the ritual, you can still bring in both the new sigil, make that the center point, and on the side, you leave the other sigil. What it's supposed to do is supposed to tell the subconscious, especially if the other sigil worked, that this stuff does work. And, that can be, especially for beginners, can be a little bit difficult because, well, consciously you may believe this works. Of course, because of the nature of the world we live in, like with the whole thing of, people telling us, oh, magic's not real, imaginations, it's just your imagination, all this stuff is fake, blah, 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 blah. I mean, any astrologer knows that one of the biggest challenges is trying to convince people that, yeah, astrology does work, but then, of course, it becomes the problem. People think it's a spiritual belief system, and it's solely just fact. It's just something that people do just to, feel special, even though, no, it's not. It's a science of electromagnetism. It does work. And, these little, I guess you can say eternal demons can sometimes lay in the back. If you dealt with them, then great. But nevertheless, unless you want to encourage your subconscious that, this stuff works. Because if you get your subconscious believing, then all the better. And that's really what we want to do. What was next after that? Oh, and another use for sigils as well that you can also do is that you can also take your sigil, instead of using it in a ritualistic fashion, what you can also do is that you can actually leave it somewhere in your home, right? You will, because what the sigil, candle ran out.
Oh. And our battery saver just came in.
Our light dimmed at the same time as yours did.
Wow. Ain't that some timing?
Yeah.
It probably hit Saturn hour or something.
Maybe. Oh, that's the window I forgot to open here. Let's see. Planetary hours.
It's the moon.
Hour. Oh, really?
It's almost Saturn in like 10 minutes.
Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Okay, I guess it's just the time zone difference, like the actual natural time zone, not the artificial one of Central Time at Eastern Time. But still close enough. Yeah, because let's see, before the hour of Saturn, you had the hour of the moon. Huh.
Yeah, because they go in order.
Yeah. So we just finished shoaling. We just finished. Oh yeah, we're just talking about the. So another thing you can do. Oh, right. So another thing you can also do with your sigil is leaving it in a very inconspicuous place. So you want to hide it in plain sight, somewhere that you can physically see it, but not in a place where it's going to grab your attention. So say, for example, like on a windowsill, right? Maybe you want to leave it on the corner of the kitchen counter, somewhere that your subconscious is going to see, because your subconscious is constantly taking in information. It constantly, doesn't matter what your conscious mind is doing. Your conscious mind can be on complete autopilot. You can be in complete, I guess, zombie mode. You're just going through the motions of the day, or daydreaming even. You're just in la la land and going about your day. While your conscious mind is preoccupied, your subconscious is constantly on the lookout, because we said before, it is the all-seeing eye. It's constantly taking things in. So if it notices the sigil, that your conscious mind does not see it, because the conscious mind acts as a filter. So anything that information takes in, it goes straight into the conscious mind, and it can reject or deny or even stop anything getting into your subconscious. But if it doesn't catch it, straight to the subconscious, doesn't matter if it's good or bad, it'll take it. And if we have that sigil lying about, well, that can be a good thing, because if you're constantly physically seeing it, even if not registering it, you're still having that activation take place. This can be a bit of a subtle process. It can take a little while. This, and it's obviously largely depending on whether or not you're constantly acknowledging the sigil or not, right? Eventually, what's going to happen is that whatever the sigil does, it's going to start bringing that effect in. Now, if you're living with someone, like say whether a significant other or other family, you can have them, and you make your sigil, you can have them say, hey, can you just kind of hide this in plain sight somewhere, right? And of course, don't go looking for it. And they'll go and hide it in plain sight, somewhere that you can physically see it or pass by it. Or you yourself can also put it in a place, but don't forget as well to make sure not to focus on it. Just put it there, leave it. All right, it's part of the scenery, just leave it there. Don't worry about it anymore. then afterwards you go about your day, just focus on something else.
If you see it after your family members put it in a place and your conscious mind sees it, should they put it somewhere else?
You could do that as well. Alternatively, you can do is simply just train your mind and focus on, and just keep your mind off it. So it's like, oh, hey, there's a sigil. Immediately remind yourself, all right, focus on something else now. Forget about it. So that's always going to be the tricky thing, is to be able to compartmentalize your mind in a way where you can easily just trick it to do certain things, whether it's forgetting about something, immediately focus your focus on something else, whatever it is. Because remember, doing magic is really just one big giant fancy self-hypnosis session. You're just hypnotizing yourself or subliminally programming yourself to do specific things. So if you're able to train your mind in a way where, like, yeah, sure, we can do things in a grand way, whether through candles, robes, sigils, whatever, but we can also do this in very specific, more, I guess, immediate ways, where you can activate certain things in your mind, or, like, maybe snap your fingers, think a certain thought, and then immediately change your focus. And of course, this is going to be personal for each individual. There are many tips and techniques out there that teach you how to do it, or you can practice yourself, develop your own techniques to be able to do this.
It's just like the symbol on the fridge. You don't see it. You don't see the symbol on your fridge, but that imprint is going into you. And then that's how they're working their commercial magic on their clients.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that same stuff is everywhere. Because sometimes what could happen as well, because I remember hearing the story, this guy was like, where he completely, like, got off of fast food, right? He doesn't eat fast food anymore. He stopped eating it, right? And then he went into his kitchen one day. He was looking for something, and when he came out of the kitchen, he had the sudden craving for McDonald's, right? Even though it's like, oh, this is weird. Why am I craving McDonald's? I stopped eating that crap years ago. This is so weird. And then afterwards, he was talking to his significant other, and she told him that, it's like, oh yeah, didn't you see the bag of McDonald's I had left on the kitchen table? And I was like, no, I didn't see it at all. But that's why, it activated that urge, that desire, even though he didn't have it. That thing was still built in. That the McDonald's logo, when he saw it, well, his subconscious saw it, it activated that urge. And so yeah, everything we see out there is why, like, they put these things in plain sight. Even though, like, yeah, sure, these giant corporations, whether it's just these either honest businesses, or even the larger Walmarts, mega corporations, have these things hidden in plain sight, not just solely because they're doing nefarious things, but it's also because how they trick us into using our ability to do magic, because they're doing their own thing behind the scenes, but they're also trying to trick us into doing it as well. And even the average Joe Schmo going about his day, 9-to-5 job, doesn't know that even the first thing about astrology, doesn't even know that it exists, is still doing it, even by virtue of just seeing these things. So it is something we have got to be careful about, because we got to be careful what kind of media we consume. Now, because we're blasted constantly, especially if you live in, like, in an urban location, they can't really do much about it, because it's everywhere. At that point, you may as well just go around blindfolded, but that's not very healthy for you, because roads and cars are a thing. And of course, you could trip and easily bump into things, and you may get some weird comments, and people looking, why is this guy walking around with a blindfold? But yeah,
come on, man.
Yeah, man. I don't want to suddenly bring a bunch of angry gnomes kicking me in the shin next week, man. It's very inconvenient. I mean, I have to buy shin pads for that, and it hurts a lot. but yeah, it's another reason why I think we talked about in a previous episode why, I think it was an episode, I forget if it was recorded or not, but how even, like, car logos would have, like, say, like, Ram has Aries, was it Volvo, right? It has symbol of Mars, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because they are utilizing these universal symbols of astrology in order to activate certain things in our mind. Of course, it can have multi-use. It's not just simply tricking us, but they also utilizing those powers too. Of course, we feed into it by just so much as knowing about it. That's why early on we talked about being able to reject and to deny intrusive thoughts. Now, lost what I was saying there. And Nick, I think you wanted to say something.
And then they use like the most, the best symbols that are like in our DNA throughout history, like pictures of the zodiac, like Aries is or Chevrolet is the cross.
Mm-hmm.
And then Walmart's the 8-spoked wheel. So they just use these ancient symbols that are in our ancestry, therefore in our DNA, probably our junk DNA. And then they're used, so essentially the point is that we use sigils all the time. Now we're making our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And it's great too, because yeah, like I mentioned before, like sigils by themselves are extremely powerful, right? They can do so much. You can really make a whole practice just around sigils alone, right? You don't, like, once you know how to do sigils, you practically got everything. Now, of course, if you still remember the basics, right, with the law of correspondences as well, and polarity, all the Hermetic laws, if you keep those in mind and you want to start doing sigil stuff, then yeah, you can bring practically anything in your life. Now, of course, I would still recommend expand a little further than that. You want maybe bring in candles, maybe bring in oils, maybe bring in incense, expand from there. But sigils as very basic tool, but very, very powerful. It's usually the simple things that are actually the most powerful. Like, for example, the circle, right? Very simple shape, but it's so significant. Right? It's used practically everywhere. Because it's both represents the rings of Saturn. So you have the authority, and when you stand in it, you become the sun, and the sun is the king. So you incorporate, and if you're familiar with syncretism, then Jesus is the sun, and Saturn is also the Christ, because it's also Kronos, Krishna, Christos. So by doing so, you actually take on the embodiment of Jesus Christ right there. And of course, if he's the king, well, the king makes the rules, right? King gives out the orders, gives out the decrees. It's just like, hey, I'm the king, and I decree that we get 3 bundles of carrots. For some reason, hey, I'm hungry and I need to feed my bunny too. But yeah.
Earlier you were speaking on disposing of the sigil. That's not required, right? That's by choice? Or do you really, after you've hidden it around, and seen it subconsciously for however long, then dispose of it? Or
yeah, so sigil disposal, it's really more of, I don't want to say it's optional, but it's not necessarily like, at least this is just in my experience as well. Someone else might say something different. Sigil disposal is not necessarily required, but it can really help drive home that something has been used. Because you want to also tell your subconscious this thing has been used, it has been activated. So now it needs to fall in alignment with the fact that it's been burned, it's been used. So especially when it comes to, when burning is like, oh, hey, this is activated. Now the ashes, that energy is scattered out there. So yeah, that's the message you're telling your subconscious. So you don't have to, but it helps.
okay.
And when it comes to,
Would you put the sigil in your house somewhere, or burn it, or both at different times?
So if you're using it in your house, I mean, obviously you're gonna keep it up there. Once you notice that it activated, so you remember, say, oh, hey, yeah, that thing showed up. Oh yeah, I made a sigil for that, right? Then yeah, you can go ahead and burn it. Of course, when you burn it, Yeah.
After it's manifested, you dispose of it.
Yeah. If you're doing it via, hiding in plain sight. If you're doing it to charge and activate, then you burn it afterwards.
Okay.
What was it? Yeah. So, and again, remember, like, burning it and scattering the ashes is again also symbolic as well. Because remember, it's all about symbolism, right? It's all about communicating with the subconscious. So following the same rhythm, following the same pattern of, you're pretty much talking to your subconscious. You got to tell it that it's burned, it's been used up, it's been activated, and the energy is now scattered out there. So making that impression tells it, oh, okay, so that's what's going on. That's what I'm going to need to make happen. And if you're doing the hiding in plain sights, yeah, you'd probably do that after it manifested, not before. Oh yeah, and I was going to mention too, just because you burn and activate a sigil, so if you draw it and activate it, it doesn't mean that you have to throw away the sigil forever, right? Because you're still going to have an archive of that sigil, saved somewhere in a folder. And actually, that brings me up to my next topic is organizing your sigils. So, like we talked about before, the moon is a big, significant, and important thing to keep in mind, right? Like wherever it is, it's going to determine the theme as well as the energy of that sigil. And the same thing applies to any kind of ritual you do. So so if it's an Aries moon, it's going to be an Aries sigil. If it's Gemini sigil, etc. And typically, when you activate your sigil, or maybe you want to use it, you want to wait for the same moon sign to correspond with it, right? You want to keep that same energy because you don't want to swim against the current, right? So when you make your sigil, one thing I suggest doing is creating an organizational system for yourself, right? Again, whether it's digital or physical, up to you. So one thing you want to get is either 12 different bags or 12 folders of each moon sign. So you have your Aries, you got your Taurus, you got your Gemini, and Cancer, etc. So when you make your sigil, after you're done with it, you're pretty much going to put it into these folders or bags, wherever it is you want to save it, and that's where you're going to keep it. So next time, so it's a corresponding moon sign. So you make a Capricorn sigil, and then you forgot about it, and then next Capricorn moon comes along. It's like, oh hey, yeah, I have a Capricorn sigil I can activate. You go through your bag and you look at all your Capricorn sigils, and you realize, oh hey, I forgot what that one does. That's the perfect time to activate that. Or as you pull it out, it's like, oh no, I kind of remember what it does. Put it back in. Then that means you got to wait a little longer. It's not ready yet.
So you don't want to activate them like right away. You make it and then put it in the bag. You can pre-charge it, put it in the bag, and then later on, after you've forgotten what it is, then you activate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're basically just talking to your subconscious mind.
Yep, that's the whole thing. And that's, you're talking to your subconscious mind. You're basically, doing these grand gestures. It's like, same ways of, taking it out on a date, right? You want to make a good impression, which is really the whole thing. You make an impression, right? Now, of course, depending on how susceptible it is, right? Like sometimes some people may need to have extra help. Other times you may have moments where people who so much as think of something and it's already enough, right? Like say you pull up like, oh, hey, that's a symbol of Jupiter. And like, oh, hey, I just got a crap ton of money. I don't know where the hell this came from, but okay, cool. Or maybe you think of, literally whatever, like the possibilities are endless. I can think of any number of examples. We'd be here all day. And well, sure, granted, when it comes to subconscious susceptibility, it can be a double-edged sword, right? Which is why, again, we have to protect the gates of our mind, which is why when we go out into the streets or into cities or wherever, we see all these symbols around, even like things we consume on social media, if we're scrolling through YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, You know, like, we got to be careful. Doing mindless scrolling is probably one of the worst things you could possibly do, because even if you're not consciously registering whatever's passing by, right, your subconscious is, right? And in order to reject something, you got to bring it into focus and tell yourself to reject it. Of course, that can be mentally exhausting. And also, you're putting everything onto your conscious mind. And if you don't handle it correctly, it can still kind of backfire. Right. So again, it's not always necessarily like a doom and gloom thing where it's, you know, like, it's like, oh, then if our subconscious is so susceptible to this, then, you know, what, then we're kind of screwed, right? Well, no, of course not, because, you know, the conscious mind acts as a filter. And of course, you know, the susceptibility of everyone's subconscious can be you know, different. And, you know, depending on how you train your mind, how you structure your own mind, and your relationship between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind can also, you know, change this reality for you. And, you know, really, that's the whole thing of magic, is to change your reality, whether it's within yourself or outside of yourself. And yeah.
Very good. Yeah. That's all about just being aware of our surroundings.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
not go into that city if you can help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've already come to the conclusion that countryside living is probably the best one in this day and age. Once upon a time, man, I've been so bad, but nowadays, not so much. I mean, it's not even just the symbolism, but it's even the stuff that's sort of within as well, whether it's the people themselves or just the environments. You know, take your pick. There's any number of reasons. Nothing I'm trying to. Oh, go ahead.
You want tree, leaf, sigils, and plant signatures embedding into your consciousness rather than corporations.
Yeah, that, I think that's another big reason why a lot of people like to go with not obviously the preferences will differ from person to person, but you know, you've got things like high ceremony magic, which, you know, is more like robes, temples, the fancier garb, right? And then you have low folk magic, which is like things like Wicca and witchcraft, you know, things that people do in the countryside. Because high ritual magic is things that like the priests and the monks, or I guess monks, maybe it depends on the monks, but you know, the priests would practice, right, in the big fancy temples, since they have the resources to get the fancy stuff. That's what they practice with, right? But the low folk magic done by the country bumpkins, you know, they only have to work with what they got. So instead, they use more nature related things, right? Whether it's herbs, whether it's trees, just whatever they can find out in the forest or in the fields. That's what they would use. Now, that being said, high ritual and low folk magic, despite the namings saying there's neither one of these things is necessarily inherently superior or inferior to the other. High ritual magic, as fancy as it is, doesn't mean it's more powerful than low folk magic, and vice versa. Low folk magic doesn't mean it's weak. It's just supposed to be like, you know, high nobility who practice high magic. That's why they do it. Low folk magic, you know, the lower classes, you know, the farmers and whatnot. That's what they would practice. But both are equally capable. Just think of them as more as themes and styles rather than capability. So one works a little bit more with the celestials, one works more with the elements. Both equally capable, just how they do it is different. So think of it as a language. What else did we cover? Oh, I don't remember if we covered this already. Well, I know I mentioned the moon placement as well. We talked about, did we talk about the moon placement as well as the planetary hours, or no?
I think we may have touched on it a bit.
Okay. All right, so just real quick to talk about it. Another thing to keep in mind, like I mentioned before, when it comes to organizing your sigils, you also, and again, we talked about it many times, being a mystic, being an astrologer first, any competent magician out there is going to have a basic foundation in astrology, is you want to keep an eye on where the moon is. Not just where the moon is in terms of its sign, but you also want to keep in mind on its phase as well. Because if the moon, depending on what phase the moon is in, will determine whether or not you're going to be pushing or pulling something in. So whether you're doing white or black magic, like we talked about in the previous episode. And And of course, yeah, like I said, the sign as well, because the sign can also determine what is the best theme to focus on, what is the best target to focus on. So if it's an earth sign, especially especially whether it's fixed or cardinal, is great for bringing in wealth. If it's maybe you want to have more mystic or maybe more psychic experiences, maybe you want to focus more on the water signs, whether it's maybe Cancer or Scorpio or even Pisces, right? And of course, it's not just the element too, but even the theme of the signs too. So maybe if you want something to do with more the astral realms or dreams or whatever, maybe you want to focus more on Pisces. Maybe if you want to focus something more within, maybe like your own internal waters as well. Maybe especially when it comes to things of sexual nature, maybe you want to focus more on Scorpio, right? Maybe, or another thing is maybe something to do with like, say maybe motherhood, maybe use Cancer, right? And so on and so forth with the rest of the signs, right? Like, just find the best one that would work the best with what it is you're trying to do with. And then of course the phase as well. Remember when we talked about statements of intent, how you word something will determine what if you're pulling or pushing. So keeping accounts on when creating your statement of intent is, okay, do I want to make this in a way where I'm pushing something away? So if you're trying to bring in wealth, but it's a waning moon, you want to push away poverty. Maybe it's a waxing moon. Well, that's easy. Just like, oh, bring in more money. That's simple as. Well, I can go on, but I think I pretty much covered all of that as well. And another thing if you want to do so as well, is to keep in mind on the other placements too, right? Say if you really want to tap in as well, more like want to borrow in a power from a certain planet, knowing where that planet is, or whether or not it's retrograde or not, can also determine a lot. So say if you want to bring in something Mercury related, or doing something Mercury related, you want to keep in mind whether or not Mercury is retrograding or not. Because if it's retrograding, you can still use it normally, but when a planet is retrograde, it kind of changes how it works. So it typically goes into its opposite effect. So you can still use Mercury, but however, instead of being something that involves communication and knowledge or even business, it becomes the trickster too. So keep that in mind, because Mercury might be a little bit tricky with you in that regard. It can still work.
And
so like
would you want to be aware also what sign the planet is in? Like, for instance, if a planet was in detriment or fall, you wouldn't want to use that particular planet at that moment? Or would it not matter so much, just more of a retrograde?
To an extent, maybe. It wouldn't, my experience, it wouldn't really matter too much, but it can still have like a latent effect. Again, it would depend on what it is you're doing as well. If it really want to bring that in, that may be something you want to consider. But of course, like I said, it's like you don't have to, but you might be swimming against the current if it's in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Also, another thing to keep in mind is the planetary hours as well. So you also, while you have your days, and of course the moon signs as well, you also want to keep an eye on like when you do something. So each day, each hour, is going to have like a planetary power associated with it. Now, these ones can be a little bit tricky to kind of keep track of because of the nature of how the planetary hours work. Because the first planetary hour of a day always starts the moment the sun rises. Now, of course, because of how seasons work, when that happens can change a little bit. And depending on when it rises and when it sets can determine how long those hours are. So it's not necessarily always going to be an exact 60 minutes. And it's always going to start like at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Right. It's going to vary a little bit. So as Nick showed you a few times, there are many places you can look it up on. You can either look it up online, or you can find a phone app that can help keep track of it for you. So that one that he was showing off was you found you have an Android, right? Using Android? Yeah. So the one that he showed off was called Planetary Times. And it's actually a pretty neat one. It has a few features in it too, but of course the one that we're primarily looking at here is the planetary hours. So like he was showing off, depending on your location and your time zone, the hour will be different.
Yeah, and you can make it so that you get notifications that you're constantly like, oh, it's Jupiter hour, oh, it's Saturn hour or whatever. And we make sure, like, for instance, we were booking flight tickets. So we made sure to do it on Thursday, Jupiter's day, during the Jupiter's hour.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Just to have our travels go smoothly.
Yeah, that's a smart one too. Yeah, and it doesn't even just.
I don't know if that's something we're supposed to share, but.
Well, I mean, it already happened. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's past experience, you can absolutely still do it. The only thing is to make sure, if you want to utilize that in such a sense, like, not to advertise it. But like, if it happened past as well, it's like, oh yeah, that's what we did last time, and it already worked. Yeah, you can talk about it all day long.
Okay.
Like. Yeah, it's only just yeah. What else do I need to cover? So we covered the planetary. Oops, I'll let it just kick. Oh, just the board. So we covered the planetary hours, the moon sign, as well as other. I think we may have covered everything. I don't believe that there was anything else left. So yeah, so now that we covered on charging and what to do with it, as well as the considering the astrological influences as well, I think that pretty much covers it. So once again, to come to use sigils, just to quickly go over to make sure that we got everything. So you can either charge it, you can either leave it in plain sight, or you can use it as a ritual implement, which is more, as you get more experience, it's probably what you can end up doing. So to use it as a ritual implement is really simple. Usually what happens is that you have your ritual space or your altar. You'll have maybe a candle up there, you have your other implements, whatever those may be, and of course in the center somewhere you're going to have your sigil too, and you're going to go through with whatever it is you're doing. And these things are very easy to use, right? And you don't have to keep them on a piece of paper either, right? You can actually use these same sigils in multiple different places. So you can like draw it as well. So say for example you have like a glass of water or a mason jar, whatever, you can take a marker, draw whatever sigil you make, put it on there, and you can program that water with that sigil, right? You can also, if you're a bit more creative on the crafting, like Chris, I know you do the jewelry as well. You can make talismans as well, right? Like you can make a necklace or a ring or whatever, and whatever it is you're making out of, you can inscribe that same sigil on it somewhere and utilize that as an implement or as an everyday thing, right? So if you have a pendant with, a certain sigil, you can absolutely wear that, right? The only thing is, of course, don't advertise what it does. Make sure you yourself also forget what it does as well. And yeah, carry that with you. Like magic, you can be extremely creative with.
That's a good idea. You wouldn't be able to look down at the one that unless it hung low enough. Maybe I could put my sigil on her necklace and she could put her sigil. So we're always looking at each other and subconsciously seeing that sigil.
Or if you look in the mirror too, if you're wearing
Okay,
it
if you look at the mirror,
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I really like about this is that you can incorporate this into, if you have kids, you can make it like an art project or like a creative project. And then not only are, you're getting creative, but you're also learning magic and how to manifest.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's really a lot of implications as well. Like I know for some people, it's like they when they first get into magic, it's like there's always these tiny little rules that you always got to keep an eye out for. And then at first it can seem a little bit overwhelming as well. Like it's like avoid doing this, avoid doing that. Make sure to do this, make sure to do that. And it's like, oh man, so many rules. How do I get creative? Do I have to? Is all my knowledge going to be about stuff that people have written down? I mean, okay, sure, in part, yes. But once you know all the rules, once you know how things work, then that's where the freedom comes in. Because then everything else becomes so simple. It's just like, okay, let's just line up correspondences. Once you know how to do that, then you can make your own rituals, make your own spells. Like you can make your practice your own. Now, of course, you can still utilize spells and rituals that others have created, especially whether it's more recent that someone else in this current age made or something that's made from way back when. You can utilize that or do that, whatever the case. Naturally, of course, if at some point you might be like, I can't find a certain ritual that suits my needs. Well, I know how to use correspondences correctly and how polarity works, et cetera, et cetera. I can just make my own. And if you follow the same rules, it's going to work. And this is, yeah. And like I said before, experimenting is highly encouraged because that's the best place where you're going to get knowledge, actually practicing it. So again, I'm repeating it over and over again, but broken record, right? If I'm annoying you with it, that's probably a good thing. Make sure to have a practice, right? Because, yeah, sure, well, obviously in the beginning, like when you're learning stuff, you're mostly just going to be learning, having the knowledge, which obviously you got to start somewhere. But eventually make sure to actually utilize that knowledge. If you really want to be a magician or even consider it a magician, you have to actually use it, right? Because it can only sit in your head collecting dust for so long.
Yeah, that's a good point to end on, definitely. You got to use it, otherwise you're going to lose it.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, like imagine teaching someone how to play guitar, but they never play guitar. What's the point?
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks again so much for being with us and teaching us. I've done a few sigils and it's been fun, and I learned more even during the show, like more of the process of it, like what we can do with it after we've made it. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to share this stuff.
Yeah. Well, you all have a beautiful day, and you know, like Nick just mentioned, make sure you use this stuff. You can watch, listen, but it's not going to make much of a difference until you start acting on your knowledge. Okay, you all have a beautiful and blessed day.